Thank you, Eva. Здравствуйте. Меня зовут Mircea Bădescu, and that's about all. My first name is Slavic, of Slavic origin, and my family name is Romanian. So I think now that we have established this, we can move on to the presentation. Next, please. Next slide, please. First of all, thanks to my colleagues from the ETF for inviting us to be the first one to join this endeavor called DARYA. And we really appreciate that. So I think Francesca and myself are really lucky. Thanks to all of you for joining today. I know that you are coming from a number of countries. For me, the furthest eastern point, geographical point I went was Tbilisi. So I've never been in the Central Asia region, and I don't usually work with the Central Asia region. So I take this opportunity to listen more, and I will stay with you the whole day. Today, what I will try to present you is a sequence of things. First of all, what is a good indicator? Which are the main data sources to collect indicators for education, skills, and employment? How do we use the indicators? And what's happened at the European level in terms of indicators? It's a process called benchmarking, which is a bit difficult to translate. And then I will end with ETF KISE, or Key Indicators on Education, Skills, and Employment. And I will open for questions because I also want to hear more from you. What you see on the screen now, it's a standard indicators framework in which you have the inputs, the process, and the outcomes and the outputs in a very simplified manner. The inputs could be the financing or the money, the number of teachers. The process could be the class size, for instance, very simplified. The outputs could be the dropout rates, for instance, and the outcomes could be the skills and competencies that the students get at the end of an educational cycle. This is, again, very simplified. In reality, we work with much more complex issues than this, but just to give you an example of how we frame the educational process. Next slide, please. Okay, what we have here, it's actually in a nutshell, what is a complete indicator? How do we let's say assess an indicator? And you have several characteristics. You should know also that at European level, we statisticians are like doctors. We have a code of practice which has 14 principles. And it refers to the way of releasing the data, the way of communicating with our customers. But a complete indicator, in a nutshell, has to have these 4 characteristics, so to speak. So it has to be timely. It means that the users should know when we release the data at a certain point in time, and that's called a release calendar. It has to be reliable or accurate. It has to have a kind of objectivity check. Okay, so we need to do our best to measure the things correctly and objectively. It has to be accessible or traceable. It has to have a source, meaning that the data providers have to document the information, the data, both in terms of numbers, but also in terms of definitions and the classifications they use. And it has to be relevant and clear, or in other way, to meet the user's needs. Okay, we don't work with, we work with symbols, but behind the symbols, there's always a number, a definition, and something which has to be very clear. If you look at this, you will say, okay, but this we also do. It's not very obvious, I must say, and I work with many statistical offices, and sometimes they have difficulties to have this in these conditions, these criteria applied all together. There's no golden indicator. Okay, we don't have something like magic. So you say, okay, this is the golden indicator for education. It will tell you everything. No, we contextualize. The indicators are like lamps They light only around a certain surface, so to speak. Okay, so if someone tells you that it has the magic solution to measure, this is not always true. Next slide, please. Which are the data, the main data sources? And they are divided, so to speak, in two different characteristics of the registered data, the one which are collected by the ministries, agencies, public employment surveys, and things like that, and the survey data. And in the survey data, you have several other categories. So, for instance, you can have a standalone survey, and Francesca has mentioned before the employer survey. We do have a standard standalone surveys on skills and job now, which we are conducted with countries. Or you can have the so-called proxy surveys. That's the yellow part. Oh, sorry, I used the acronyms. That's the LFS, the Labor Force Survey, or a survey which is conducted at the European level and is called Adult Education Survey. These are surveys which can shed some light on education because they have the educational variables inside the surveys. And for instance, when I start working on statistics, on international statistics some 25 years ago, the Labor Force Survey only had 2 or 3 variables. Now there are about 50 at the European level. And that refers to several issues like training, like work-based learning. So you can build a lot on the Labor Force Survey, although it's not an educational survey, so to speak. And then you have in the green part, the so-called large-scale survey, the international surveys like the OECD PISA or the IEA TIMSS, on which I think some of the countries from Central Asia takes part. And these are also very important. But basically, at the national level, you work with the blue part, with the administrative data, and then you send to UNESCO, because all the countries in the Central Asia are UNESCO countries, are so-called UNESCO countries. The world of data is divided in 3. One, the most part belongs to UNESCO. Second part belongs to the OECD, and the third part belongs to the Eurostat, and that's actually the acronym from UOE, UNESCO, OECD, Eurostat. It's a joint data collection which happens every year, and it's standardized with the classification, a manual, and things like that. And then you have the surveys, okay, in the yellow part. You may not have the standalone surveys at the national level, like the employer surveys, and you may not take part in the large-scale surveys on the right part of this chart. Okay, so basically, typically it's mainly the left part. What's the difference between them? The administrative data are released later than the survey data. The UOE data comes 2 years after, so it's T-2, meaning that now they release the UOE 2020, the information of 2020. We are in 2023. Usually the data are released in June. The advantage of the proxy surveys, like the Labor Force surveys, is that they are much faster. They are 1 year faster, so to speak. I mean, it's a survey that usually is released the year after it was conducted. Okay, so now we have already the information for 2021, and we will soon have the information for 2022. I think we can move to the next one, please. The large-scale international survey, I'm not going to insist very much on this. I only tell you that so far, according to what I know, only Kazakhstan takes part in PISA, both PISA and PIA. And I think Kyrgyzstan I'm not sure about Kyrgyzstan in TIMSS. TIMSS it's conducted by another international agency, which is called International Evaluation Agency. That's a third it stays for third international mathematics and science study, and it assesses the competencies at the end of grade 8 and at the end of grade 4 in math and science, and is used a lot by my colleague in the World Bank, who I think some of you know, Harry Patrinos, who does the Human Capital Index, and he's using the scores from teams to distinguish between schooling and learning. It's a very interesting approach. If you ask me, I think you should try to participate, at least in PISA. It brings you a lot of information. It takes you out from the national context. And I can tell you what has happened in my country of origin in Romania, where we thought that we are the smartest people in the world, and it turned out that 40% of the students at the age of 15 were not able to read. Reading today means not spelling, it means something else, making sense of what you read. So yeah, I think it's quite an interesting exercise. Now we can move to the next one, please. Okay, how do we use this? I think the indicators, I think each country has its own way of using the indicators. What we do in ETF, we do a lot of reporting. I think Francesca already mentioned, but also Eva has also mentioned. We do a lot of monitoring as well. We issue some publications also, and I think the interesting part is that one of our most popular publications, if not the most popular one, if you judge by web statistics, is KISE, which you can see later on. So it's a kind of validation of the fact that the users like you are extremely interested in data, in the numbers. And we do analysis. So these are more or less the four types of outputs of the statistical data. We can move to the next one, please. Okay, and this starts, I would say, the most interesting part of the presentation, because it speaks about comparability, it speaks about the use of indicator for policy mention, for policy analysis and things like that. It's a process that we do in in the European Union for something like, I think 20 years, at least I've been involved in this for 20 years. And it comes with education at the European Union level is not in the competence of the union, it's in the competence of the national, of the member states. But the union has competencies in monitoring, first of all, in mobility, like Erasmus and things like that. And therefore, the benchmarking is extremely important. It's a very politicized process, so to speak. We work a lot with targets, with what called targets. So basically, the benchmarks have attached a number at the end. Okay. So the benchmarks are indicators, are words, and the targets are numbers. And for each benchmark, you have a target attached. So for instance, on I'll come back to this later on. The low skilled underachievement, it's an indicator, but the target is below 15 by 2030. Okay, so you have an indicator, a political objective, and the target which has to be met. The targets are not supposed to be met by each member state, but they're called European average levels of performance, meaning that not each country, each member state has to meet them, but the Commission encouraged the countries to establish the national targets as well. Okay, let's move to the next one to see which are the targets. I think we can see all of them. So I think there are 7, so it should be 7 enters. Okay. Excellent, thanks a lot. So these are the 7 targets that were approved by the Educational Council, the Council of Education Ministers, 2 years ago, and they refer to the horizon 2021-2030. And you would see a visualization on the right-hand side, and the name of the benchmarks on the left-hand side. And they refer to broader objectives, broader educational objectives. Okay, so for instance, the first one is about basic or foundation skills, and is based on PISA. And there's a target to be reached by the Union by 2030. The second one is about digital skills and comes from a standalone survey, and it refers to digital skills of students at the end of the 8th grade. The third one comes from administrative data. It's actually the only one coming from the administrative data from the UOE data collection, and it refers to students age 3, participation of students age 3 to early childhood education and care. The fourth one is one of the oldest, if not the oldest, together with PISA. It's a proxy for the dropout. It's a comparable indicator for the dropout. You know, the dropout is very complicated to make it comparable, and therefore we statisticians have invented this indicator, which is called early school leavers, which is based on the labor force survey, and it's the percentage of those age 18 to 24 who are low educated, meaning E-scale 0 to 2, so they either have no education or they didn't go beyond the compulsory education, and who are no longer in education and training. And so they are a kind of vulnerable group, and therefore they are investigated, and you can see the percentages on the right hand side on which is the target, which is the current value, and which are the distribution by gender. Then we have a target on tertiary education attainment, also based on the LFS. That's for those aged 25 to 34. And then I have the baby of the benchmarks, which is a new indicator based on a new variable in the labor force survey, which deals with work-based learning. So far, we didn't have anything on the work-based learning, and there was a pressure both from the member states, but also from the Commission, from the Council, sorry, to develop an indicator on work-based learning. And this came out only last year, actually. So it's still under development. That's work-based learning at the workplace, and this workplace can be anything from private company to public to NGO and things like that. And it assesses the exposure towards work-based learning. And then we have the lifelong learning dimension, that's called adult participation in lifelong learning for adults, obviously, also based on LFS. So as I told you before, you see you have a difference between the administrative data sources. So here you have only one indicator out of 7, which is based on administrative data sources, and everything else is based on survey. Either proxy surveys, as I said, like the labor force surveys, or in international surveys like PISA or the IEA survey. And if you click on the blue line, you get you'll be redirected to the Eurostat. Okay. Okay, so that was the part of the benchmark. We can move to the next one. I think I have about 5 minutes to tell you about KISE, which is the main title of the presentation. We can show them also. Okay, and okay, that's great. Thanks. Now, KISE, it's already a brand for it, if I may say. So it's like something like that. It is very well known around, and it has a kind of history, and it's a dynamic list that basically it serves many purposes. So we use it a lot in monitoring, in media products, in analysis. And it's about the information that we gather from the countries, from the statistical offices, basically, on 3 issues: on education and skills and employment. It's balanced because we have different needs and we have different priorities. So, for instance, now the block in green, the youth transition, is coming strongly in our work, and therefore it has enhanced to include many indicators beyond the youth unemployment rate, which doesn't even count anymore in the youth transition. So that was the block that was enhanced. The skills ones on the right hand side was also enhanced with new work that we have been doing in the past years. So, for instance, the skills mismatch that Francesca has mentioned has been very let's say developed in very present in our work in the past couple of years, and therefore, and is the most let's say politicized one, because there we have all the frameworks related to, or the EU frameworks related to European skills agenda, related to upskilling, reskilling, which are extremely important at the European Union level. And the first one remained a bit underdeveloped. It's a combination of administrative and survey data. Is the only one. All the others are based on administrative on survey data, be it labor force survey or international survey. And it includes the information, let's say, which is available at the school level. So it includes, for instance, the percentage of students in VET at the upper secondary level. It includes, for instance, the early school leaving rate, the tertiary education attainment, but also the education in childhood care, which is important from a political point of view. We left it a bit under documented and under analyzed, at least in the past couple of years, because we have focused on the other two blocks. So we work a lot on the youth transition now. There's a new initiative at the EU level, which is called Youth Guarantee. I know it's happening in all the other regions. I don't know about Central Asia, but I think it will come soon to you as well. And therefore, we had to enhance that one. And on the skills, I mean, I think there's no doubt that the skills, as Francesca has said, it's our #1 priority. And we have several tools there, including this standalone survey, which we will conduct. Actually, I'm joining Eva to conduct it in 9 partner countries in the coming years. So we'll have the first results in a couple of months. So that is KISE. I think I still have two minutes. What I want to say is that as I said, it's not something prescriptive. I mean, it doesn't mean that you have to calculate or you have to compute all these indicators yourselves. We are using this for different purposes, and I think we are in international organizations and have different needs compared to a national organization. You would need both national and international, because the national, for instance, number of students, you will always need it at the national level to plan, to build schools, to, and so you need the administrative data collection. You need the public employment service data collection, and there we are also very active, because you need to know what's going on with the unemployed people, how you tackle them. But some are more important than others, so to speak. And if I refer to the youth transition now, for us, the youth transition is becoming extremely important, and therefore we need to enhance the measurement so that we can engage in political work in the countries. So the data always comes at the request of something. Okay, so if our colleagues from the Commission says to us, we want to do something, we need to have the evidence base already there, so that we can say, yeah, we can go here and there. And youth guarantee is perhaps the most important political, let's say, process in which we are involved, and we will be involved in all the regions in which we work. I think I will stop here. Thanks a lot for your patience, and I'm happy to take questions.